What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Redonkulous Gaming. Today we're going to talk a little Brewmaster Monk, and we're going to go ahead and join the Necrolords Covenant. Now, Necrolords, as far as the signature ability that you're going to get by joining this Covenant, regardless of what class you join on, that ability is Fleshcraft. If you don't know what Fleshcraft is, it's essentially just an absorb shield that you can channel, and when you channel, and depending on the situation and in which you channel it, you can get anywhere between a 20% absorb and a 50% absorb. If you channel the ability after you kill a pack of mobs, or after you kill an elite pack, or after you kill a dungeon or raid boss, you have a higher likelihood of getting a 50% absorb shield after you cast Fleshcraft. So you have to channel for the full duration, and it'll scale and be anywhere between 20 and 50%. Depending on when you're actually channeling it. If you channel with nothing around, you're guaranteed at least a 20% shield. So that part is nice, is that is absolutely the low end. So at the high end, you could be walking around with a base health pool of 150% once every 2 minutes, because that is the cooldown on Fleshcraft. Now, Fleshcraft certainly is valuable, and it is certainly worth calling out from a tank perspective, which is why I wanted to spend a minute on it here. However, I will say that leveraging Fleshcraft on a Brewmaster versus really any of the other tank classes is going to net you a smaller overall shield size. And the reason for that is that Brewmasters are the very fortunate class that has the stagger mechanic, which means we have a lower health pool as a result. So stagger is so powerful that they can't necessarily give Brewmasters the same health pool as the rest of the tanks, so you're going to be slightly lower HP when you compare yourself to other tanks, which means you're going to walk around with a slightly smaller shield than you would if you were tanking on any other class. So just keep that in mind, is it scales based on your base health and the class in which you're tanking on. So we've spent a couple minutes now on Fleshcraft. I want to talk a little bit about the class ability Bonedust Brew. And if you haven't seen my past videos, really the three questions in which I ask myself when I evaluate any of our class abilities from our covenants is, first and foremost, how does the ability feel? Is it something that's fun? Is it something that adds value? Is it something that I look forward to pushing that button regardless of what I'm doing at that time? The next question that I look to answer is, what's the ability strength? Is it something that feels like it's in a good spot right now? As of this recording, we are a month out from Shadowlands, and we're getting to the point where these things are pretty much fully baked. So we have a pretty good idea of what the baseline skill strength looks like, and we're able to kind of extrapolate that and project that out to see ultimately what that might feel like when the first raid drops. Last question that we look to answer is the viability of this skill. So for me, I'm someone who focuses on PvE content. I would like to pick a Covenant ability that is ultimately going to allow me to perform very well across things like Torghast, dungeons, and raids. If a Covenant ability makes me feel viable in those three situations, then I would say that I would score viability higher than something that is really only especially strong in like a Mythic Plus setting, for example. So let's get into the ability itself. The ability that you're granted by joining the Necrolords is Bonedust Brew. A couple of things very quickly on Bonedust Brew is that it is treated just like any other brew. And what I mean by that is we now have Celestial Brew, we now have Bonedust Brew, and those two things are being, you can actually reduce the cooldown of them by just simply going through your rotation, specifically Keg Smash is in Tiger Palm. Those are the two skills that are going to reduce the cooldown of your brews, and it's certainly worth calling out here. So Bonedust Brew synergizes very well, and despite the fact that it's a minute-long cooldown, you're actually going to be casting it a lot more frequently than that, as long as you're executing Keg Smash and your Tiger Palm in the right fashion. Now, as far as what Bonedust Brew actually does, this is where you hurl a brew that you create from the bones of your enemies. So there's a little RP for you. This is where you coat all your targets for 10 seconds. And during the 10 seconds that you have as an uptime, I'll use Keg Smash as an example. If you hit flat out right with your Keg Smash, you have a 35% chance to hit that same target again with Keg Smash, but at 35% power. So 35% is the key number to remember there. So once every 3 Keg Smashes that I cast while Bonedust Brew is up, I'm going to be hitting my enemy again at 35% effectiveness. That is really the main Brewmaster function of Bonedust Brew, is that 35% chance to hit the enemy again. And I use Keg Smash as an example, but you can really kind of pick any skill, and it has a 35% chance of hitting it again at 35% effectiveness. Now, the other thing that this does while you're in Brewmaster talent is Tiger Palm and Keg Smash reduces the cooldown of your brews by an additional 1 second. And this is where you're going to get the value while Bonedust Brew is up. So I already mentioned you have 10 seconds of uptime when you're hitting an enemy. As long as you are rotationally sound and you are mindful of where your brews are in terms of cooldown, in that 10-second window, you'll be able to get Keg Smash and Tiger Palm out to the point where it's taking an additional second off of the cooldown of your Celestial Brew, of Purifying Brew, and of from your Bonedust Brew. So you can actually increase the cooldown or decrease the cooldown rather quickly during that 10-second window. Now, it is only up for 10 seconds, so rotationally you may actually attack your enemy a little bit different than you would if you did not have Bonedust Brew up, just so that you can get your other brews off cooldown faster. What Bonedust Brew is effectively going to allow you to do is to have a little bit more freedom in your talent pool than you've had in the past, and it's going to allow you to maybe tweak some things to fit your playstyle a little bit more. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that as you get used to the effects of Bonedust Brew and as you get better at managing the ability to decrease the cooldown of your other brews by just effectively executing your rotation, it may allow you to be a little bit more liberal with the way that you ultimately decide to talent yourself. We'll see how that plays out at higher level content. But sitting, at Mythic Plus and doing things like content like that, I've already found that I've had a little bit more wiggle room, and it's been a little less rigid in terms of the way that I talent my character. Now, as far as answering our 3 questions, how does the ability feel? We'll start there. The ability is actually pretty fun. It's something that feels, in terms of casting, it's very familiar to Exploding Keg from Legion, something that they also brought back in the talent tree. It's very much a point and click in terms of casting. The fact that it synergizes well with your other brews, and that you can effectively bring it off cooldown faster just by executing your rotation, is really something that makes you want to push to just do a better job, quite frankly, when it comes to executing your rotation and keeping and managing your brews in the right way. So that part is fun. Managing the brews is fun, and making sure that since we've effectively lost stagger is something that we need to actively manage, and it's now become something that is passive, it brings back the thing that we need to manage again in terms of managing your brew cooldowns. So we lost stagger in terms of management, but we gain even more tracking necessity and management necessity from our brews. So overall, I think that's fun. To each their own, though. If you've not been a fan of Brewmaster in the past, you might find it hard to embrace something like yet another resource management like the brew system. The ability strength overall, from a tank perspective, that's all we're talking about today. I feel like there could be some enhancements here, and I think what Blizzard can do to make this just a little bit stronger is actually increase the amount of uptime that Bonedust Brew has, just maybe by even 2 seconds. I think that'll make the difference, because when you start off with your gear in Shadowlands, you're going to find secondary stats don't necessarily mean much, and your haste is going to be way, way down. So you're not going to feel as smooth in your rotation as you do currently in retail, not even close. And as a result, you're going to find yourself pushing buttons and having either nothing happen because things are still on cooldown, or it's just it's gonna take a little bit of getting used to. So I think initially an additional maybe 2 seconds would certainly help with Bonedust Brew. However, as the gear scales, that's ultimately going to determine whether or not this skill is strong enough. I think that the gear scales pretty well, at least just kind of based on leveraging some of the PvP gear that they made available, which is item level 190. You get to a point where it certainly helps to smooth out your rotation a little bit, but the overall value of secondary stats are much less than what we're dealing with in retail. It's not even close. It's just a tremendous and huge gap. So those secondary stats are not going to do as much for you as they currently are today. Now, as far as the overall viability of the skill, I look at it and I feel as though I get value from doing all 3 pieces of content that I mentioned before. I could find value in doing Torghast. I can find value in dungeons. The fact that I'm able to use it essentially every other trash mob in dungeons is really nice. And it again, you're only going to get out of it what you put into it in terms of reprioritizing your rotation to make sure that it's off cooldown as soon as possible so you can cast it again. It also is very effective on bosses. Like I mentioned, during that 10-second window, you might have to tweak your rotation just a little bit to make sure that you are taking your brews off of cooldown faster and faster within that 10-second window. As long as you're making those gameplay adjustments, you're going to get a lot of joy out of this ability. You're going to feel relatively strong, and you're going to feel incredibly viable as it relates to just cross content across the PvE setting. So overall, those are my thoughts. I think this is a fun ability. I think thematically, by joining the Necrolords, it's something that fits in pretty darn well. The synergy of the brew system, so Celestial and Purifying and Bonedust Brew, just kind of all being linked and all being part of the same system in terms of reducing the cooldown on them. I think that's a really neat feature, and I'm glad that Blizzard added that into the mix. It's the only one that has that type of synergy across any of the covenants. So it's something to keep in mind, where if you like managing your brews and you like managing those cooldowns, it's something that you feel like enhances your gameplay, then this is probably a good covenant for you to evaluate. Let me know your thoughts, though, if I missed anything, or if you feel like I spoke out of turn, or you have just a completely conflicting thought. Go ahead and share it in the comments below.